Welcome to the special meeting dated November 15th, 2021 at 2 p.m. Meeting number 2121. Today we are, just read off the agenda here. Is there any disclosure of conflict of interest? No? Okay. May I get an approval of the agenda? Jeff, Bridget, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And let's start with anyone that would like to ask questions of the chief of the budget. No one? Jimmy? Oh, Bridget, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I just wonder, so last year, just a few months ago, actually, there was a purchase item, a large budget item of the armored vehicle. And I just wonder if we have any plans of the year ahead to purchase for any such large items, and if there would be any on the budget.
So on the operational side, of course, the largest expenditures that we have are the wages and benefits, which account for 85.3% of the total budgeted operating costs. And so that is 2.56% of the 3.64% increase that we have. I can say that in terms of, large items, in terms of what you were talking about, that is in the capital side. And as you say, in our capital side of the budget, we have replacement fleet vehicles valued up to $585,000. And those vehicles are throughout the organization, frontline and outfitting the frontline administrative vehicles. There's money in there for prisoner van to fix up the prisoner van. And then, of course, that's for a value of, as I mentioned, $585,000. And then the rest of the $1.5 million on the capital side of the budget is for our information technology infrastructure. And all that has been sort of accounted for by the city who is this all fits in the envelope that the city has provided for us.
Right. Actually, I thought it was pretty good percentage that we're increase, in fact, that you've presented in this budget. But I wonder if there are some spaces, places where we could, sharpen our pencil and reduce the increase somewhat.
Well, I can say that, it is a lean budget. There really is no fluff in here. We've certainly talked a bit about the increases that are affiliated with our objectives, our 2022 objectives, which it's only the incremental amounts, doesn't include the staffing end of things. And so those areas are very lean and are affiliated with our objectives for next year. I can tell you that in terms of some various enhancements, we've got about $94,000 in contracted services, as well as $25,000 in supplies and materials that are associated with various software enhancements in IT. And this is centered around internet and cybersecurity, backup information, emails and videos, that kind of thing. The other area that we have some expenses in are the $46,000 associated with succession planning, our junior leadership training associated with Queen's University, and of course our senior leadership training with U of T Rotman School of Management. Most everything else is really ongoing costs associated with renewals. And again, as I say, the largest expenditures on our capital side.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
So, Angie, this is, we're going to vote on this budget today. And that's for the board to present it to the city. What if the city said no? That this percentage is too high and you didn't have a choice, but you had to make cuts somewhere. What's the first thing that comes to mind if you had to?
Well, I'm thinking that if we were going to have to do something, I mean, as I say, the staffing area is where we've got some, I hate to reduce and not to when we have retirements to replace retirements. I mean, we need all the frontline, members that we have. We're restructuring some of our units, but I can say that, for an example, we have 2 members that are in our rope unit, and it's not 100% cost recovery. So if we took those members out of rope and absorbed them back into our organization, we would be saving about $130,000. I would not want to do that. I think the repeat offender parole program is really a public safety matter, and it gives our officers a lot of experience in this area as well. And, there's over 254 arrests have been made in East Region, which our members are part of, very high risk, dangerous offenders that are arrested. And a lot of that comes within our community that are arrested as well. So they really play a role that I would say is there for public safety. So I would hesitate to want to have to remove those 2 officers to save $130,000. Again, the other is again, not replacing retirements. And we're also mindful of that. We're hiring 4th class officers when we have retirements at a higher level. We've put a lot of mitigating strategies in place to try and make as much room as possible. So I guess that's an area that I can, bring forward, but I say it with great reluctance because I don't think it's the right thing to do.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Christian, you have a question?
Allow me to reframe the chair's question. If the increase, the requested increase were not granted, or city council sought a lower increase than the one that is being put forward and whatever ends up being approved by the board, what would be the strategic implications in terms of delivering adequate and effective policing in Kingston, in terms of delivering on the needs, values, and priorities, and the way those are articulated in the strategic plan? Conversely, what is the value added for the community of the increase that is being sought for the service, in terms of the budget increase that is being sought? What is the strategic value and add-on? So trying to shift the conversation from the outputs and the things that we are doing or we might stop doing to the broader strategic implications of being able to deliver on the mandate that the service has been given by City Council through the board and as articulated in the strategic plan.
Well, I can say that the enhancements that we are providing and that are included in our objectives are very much security related within our IT structures. It's very much also looking at the way we're doing business. So we're reshifting some of our members without hiring additional people and reshifting them to look at our trends in crimes that we're seeing. So we're looking at shifting some members into their drug and street crime units. We're looking at major crime. We're looking at the beat and our alternative response unit. And that's really rejigging some of our members, whether they're from the front line, but organizing them in a way that's looking at some of the trends. And we're seeing some trends in terms of the violent crimes that we're seeing. And as you've seen, we've had a double homicide just in October. And we're seeing much more of that. And so to get ahead of that trend, we're going to be trying to redeploy members in strategic areas such as that. And that is a way of not hiring and asking for more money for more people, but realigning our resources to where we're seeing our trends that are occurring. The other area that we're seeing some increase in costs would be really in succession planning and mental health and well-being for our members. And I think this is very important as we're moving ahead within our organizations, any organization, that we have to look after that mental health. And that little bit of funding is going in those areas in terms of training and really the creation of the equity, diversity, internal equity, diversity, and inclusion committee that we're having is all part of that rollout of our EDI plan. And these are important ways of community building and having partnerships and having persons come forward and tell us about things that are happening in our community and how we can have a better service delivery. So all these things are important for us and add value as we move ahead and look at the types of crimes, but also build that engagement within our community.
Christian, did you have a follow-up question to that? Your hand is up.
So that's very helpful, Chief. Thank you. How can we make that those strategic value add-ons measurable for the board, city council, and the public, so that the public can ascertain and understand the value added of the budget increase in terms of delivering on those strategic priorities?
Well, many of our collaborations are with our community partners so that we can reduce the calls for service that are coming to the police and can be diverted to our community partners. And so those are very good strategies. And I've talked a bit about our mental health calls for service and redirecting our priority 3 and 4 calls to our crisis team so that when there's not that public safety issue at hand, this crisis team can assist and be the first responder to those types of calls. So that's a value added in terms of reducing the kinds of calls for service that we're seeing at the front line and having the most appropriate resource attend those calls. So that is one thing that's happening. As I said, we're starting rolling out that training for our communication center and for the crisis team so that that can be in place rolling out for next year. So the continuation of, again, diverting our calls for service is going to be important for us. We've implemented a lot of train the trainer programs, so in-house training for our mental health. And so again, that's going to be value added in terms of lowering the number of persons that are going off on WSIB claims and therefore lowering the budget that is accounted for on WSIB and keeping the members at work and not going off. Again, our evidence informed staffing model, we're looking at our zone realignments for next year. We're also looking at, that's going to be important in terms of equaling out the calls for service for our members, as opposed to having a higher calls for service in certain zones and lower calls for service in others. So equaling that out. So that's going to impact the numbers of calls that our members are attending. Again, our recruitment is going to be really important in terms of our EDI strategy. That's value for us in terms of enhancing the diversity that we're bringing into our organizations. And by measuring that, we're measuring, in terms of the number of languages spoken that we're bringing into our organization. We're looking at the diversity in terms of the racialized community or the number of women that we're bringing into the organization, the diversity of thought and education that we're bringing into our organization. So those are some of the measures that we're going to be seeing by having strategies like the equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy and having that internal committee that we're working with, and then looking at our community partners and having those engagements with our community sort of to build that trust for our organization.
Christian, follow up?
Is there an opportunity that you might see to make some of these more explicit to the public and internally? Are there ways, for instance, that we can generate survey evidence, other types of evidence of the impact that the training is having in the perception of the membership, in the perception of the public, in the perception of our community partners, that would give us some robust traction? Because my assumption is that the strong strategic trajectory that you have laid out in terms of change in community relations is a trajectory that will continue in future years and that might incur subsequent requests for budget increases in future years. And so do you see perhaps an opportunity to build a more systematic baseline for the public to to understand and have a concrete, get more concrete traction on the value that their tax dollar, that the value that you lay out for their tax dollar can be systematically replicated. So you mentioned calls for service, for instance. Do you see other opportunities that we might be able to implement either in this coming fiscal year or perhaps in the next budgetary process to provide some of that more systematic benchmarking?
So, it's a good point. I mean, right now with partnerships with KCHC, we're starting to roll out our focus group sessions. So that'll really garner some input from our community as to, and we will also educate in terms of what we're doing and the kinds of different pilot projects that we're doing. And so that'll help in terms of those focus group sessions. But I can also say that this is the end of our 4-year business plan cycle. And so beginning next year, we're going to have to start for the next 4-year plan. So we're going to be starting our community and internal focus group sessions that are going to reach out to the community and reach out to our internal members to start for the next 4 years. What are we going to be looking at? What are our objectives going to be? So there's really good learning opportunities in both strategies, not only just with the KCHC partnership, but also with the new business planning strategy that we're going to be starting in January to prepare for next year. So it's going to take a whole year really to go through that. It gives an opportunity then to discuss things such as topics such as body worn cameras. And is there a need for something like that within our community to prepare for the budget strategies for the next upcoming years? And so these are the kinds of questions that we will be asking, and we will be garnering input externally and internally with the assistance, of course, of whether it's surveys, whether it's focus group sessions, and of course with the help of the board, because it's the board's strategic plan. So we're really looking forward to utilizing that to help demonstrate the need and the value.
And if I might ask, Chair, I think there's also perhaps the board can make an effort to also be more systematic and transparent in communicating more systematically with the public to support the chief in her efforts. Is that a reasonable assumption for me to make, Chair?
Yeah, it is. I mean, in progress. I'm not sure if you're aware or not. Lori has been working with IT to have all of the public information, meeting information available to the public on the website. I'm sure with the new strategic plan that will go on the website as well. And I just for the strategic plan, we have a committee. It's going to be with the chief. It's going to be with Fred. Fred, should we like the month of December? Should we start planning that, working on that strategic plan, or would it make sense to wait for the regulations to come through in January?
There's no need to wait.
Okay.
I just finished giving a session on strategic planning for CAPG, and I think Anshi was in the audience. So it's top of mind for me. I'm not doing it with any other clients at the moment. And we need to come up with a process and scale it for your interests, your community, and your dollars.
Sure.
And that's something we can do offline, I would suggest.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll send an email out to the people involved, and we'll arrange a time to get together.
Sure.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I just want to remind you too, just one other thing, I mean, our budget increase would have been at 2.68% had it not been for some unforeseen and out of our control increases that have occurred. And so some of those things, and just to refresh your memory on that, is that some of these increases we've held the status quo for our court security and prisoner transportation grant, which was unfortunately decreased by about $74,000 in the 2021 year. So that became out of our control. And I'm understanding that prisoner transportation grant is going to be held status quo for the next coming year. So for 2022, that's what we're being told. But we're also looking at increased charges, city charges, including insurance for our building and vehicles. That's $60,000 of an increase. Our building maintenance fee and capital reserves, which are all have an increase, and that's a value of $75,000 and $75,050. But we also have to increase our gasoline prices, and that was a $47,000 hit. And that's, as again, recommended by the city because our gas prices are going up, and you can see that now. The impact of WSIB has been cost us $73,000. Contractual change in the healthcare spending account was another $34,000 increase. Unanticipated maternity leaves in our human resources unit required some contract hiring for short-term absences for about $41,600. And again, contractual changes coming covering $10,000 for SIU legal fees, and we were averaging, approximately $50,000 for 5 investigations. And so these are things that are out of our control, which increased our raise from 2.6%, which is what we had forecast to begin with, and it put it up to the 3.6%. So I just want to remind you of that these are things that are out of our control that came into play.
Okay, thank you. Just so Jeff, I have seen your question. Bridget, I've seen your question. I'm going to continue with Christian because that's the conversation at hand. Christian, go ahead.
I have 2 more questions, and then I'm happy for my colleagues to weigh in. The first is, let me translate into the vernacular the questions that I've just asked. From a taxpayer perspective, as a result of this budget, will Kingston be safer? How much safer? And how will the taxpayer know that Kingston is safer?
Well, again, by reorganizing and reshifting our staffing deployment into areas we feel are going to be the areas that of the violence, drugs, in those kinds of areas. So we're looking at a decrease in those areas. We're looking at, we look at our crime severity index, and I know this year we've had 4 homicides already. So, we're looking at, that's an increase from last year. So we're looking at some of those trends to be reduced. Some of those ancillary trends, maybe in terms of robberies and so forth, may reduce as a result of looking after the high-end trafficking, guns and gangs, those kinds of things. So those statistics may help garner that we're a safe city. We are a safe city, but that reorganizing and based on the types of crimes that we're seeing, the cyber crimes that we're seeing, the fraud-related crimes, all these things that we're readjusting and redeploying, we can measure some reduction in areas potentially. But again, it's a coordinated effort that we are going to be working in partnership with our community partners, because it is and our policing partners, because these are big areas, and joint forces projects are potentially ways to go in these things.
In other words, you expect the crime severity index to go down as one of many indicators that we might have based on the budget that you've put forward.
I mean, those are one of the many things that we're looking at in terms of key performance measures. So when I take a look at, I'm just going to take a look at some of the slides that we have here. Some of the key performance indicators that we've been using and will continue to be using are some of the statistics in terms of the arrests, the charges, the calls for service, the number of guns that have been seized, our asset forfeitures. We've talked about comparative staffing levels that we're showing a number of officers per 100,000. We've used the comparator of our financial information return to show the net cost per capita per person, as well as the crime severity index. We've also looked at some of those those sector-wide trends that I just talked about, the mental health, the drugs, pandemic, guns and gangs. So those budget increases across the sector and that are challenging all of our budgets have been looked at. We've also provided an overview of the past, present, and the future spending to show that we really try and come in on budget when we're doing things. So we're really doing environmental scans. And we've had some unforeseen impacts within our organization this year, as you already know, with the month of September and October with Queen's University, and the impact of the behaviors that we've seen and some of the disruptions that have been happening there. And so these are all important things that we're going to be looking at and comparing year over year as to how we're doing. And as part of our budget, we're also listening to our stakeholders, I said, and to our members. That's part of listening to our stakeholders. And then finally, we're also looking at what we can see, what council has targeted for us. We're looking at the government demands that we're having in terms of the different grants opportunities that we're having, and capitalizing on that. And then, of course, making sure that all of this ties into the mandate that we have, and that includes looking after crime prevention, law enforcement, assistance to victims of crime, public order, maintenance, and emergency response. And then again, what management wants, and that's what we have in our 2022 objectives. So we're looking into all of that in terms of what we're listening to. And then finally, our expectations, our cost benefits that we're going to be seeing with this. And overall, we're looking to, as I mentioned already, we're looking to work collaboratively with our partners, and those are going to be those cost benefits that we're going to be seeing throughout the organization and diverting those calls for service.
Lori, did Jeff drop off the call?
He appears to have.
Is he trying to get back in through public?
I can't see that right now. I'm going to email him right now to see where he's at.
Okay. In the meantime, Bridget, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. And through you, earlier I said that our increase isn't too bad, and I was actually focusing on the 2.6% because as you just explained that the other 1% is not under our control. But there is going to be a lot of pressure at the city budget this year. There's been so many extra costs due to COVID. And I just want to check with you regarding the extra costs from the partying going on at Queen's University. And I just wonder if that was addressed appropriately and it didn't negatively affect our budget, and also moving forward that we're not adding any numbers there because of those costs.
Well, as you know, that we're still undergoing conversations with the mayor and with the university in terms of what that cost recovery is going to look like in terms of our month of September and the month of October, and all the resources that we pulled in to assist us in managing the crowds that we were seeing and keeping the community safe in that sense. So those costs, those discussions are still ongoing. So I don't have an answer for you as to how much that cost recovery will be, but it's certainly going to be a fulsome discussion with respect to Queens and with respect to all other ways that we can have cost recovery to be shared with us. You know, I look at even our the amount of, not all of our bills have come in yet either in terms of you know, the expenses. Many have been, and we might be able to have a more clear, definitive picture for our Thursday board meeting that's coming up to kind of finalize that, because we'll have a presentation about homecoming there as well. But even the COVID expenses, and I do know that we've got some, you know, the provincial government has provided all the municipalities with some money for COVID expenses and so forth, and we may be able to avail ourselves for some of those expenses that we're having, because we are doing rapid testing within our organization, and of course increased PPE expenses and so forth. So we're hoping that we can gain some benefit from those cost recoveries as well. But I can assure you that there's conversations on cost recovery for all the police resources that we have brought in, and rightly so, to help our community in quelling those crowds and ensuring that we're safe.
Thanks for that. And just a little follow-up question from something that Christian brought up earlier, and that's the communicating with the public. I just want to thank you too for responding to my question regarding the crime mapping on the website. Do we use those kind of tools? Like, I just wonder how many people actually know that this exists, that there are in reports that we have available on our website, on the police website, and if that would be a useful tool, or and if it actually indeed offers some measures for us in our next strategic planning session.
Oh, it's a good point. I know we bring it up. I'm just looking at a press release we have here, but I do believe that on the bottom of our press releases that we put out to the public, we talk about our crime mapping and that the people can access our website. It's unfortunate every once in a while when a link breaks because of an update that we've done, a security update, the link broke. And therefore, thank you for letting us know about it, because we need to be mindful that we have to check things regularly to make sure it's functioning, because I think it is a very important part of the community engagement to kind of see what's happening in the different areas of the city. So it is important, and I know that we do have in our media releases references to that crime mapping.
Great, thanks.
Jimmy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. and everyone. Thank you to all my colleagues putting up a very good questions, especially Christian has raised very good questions. My question is probably in the two questions. The one is, as a Kingstonian, as the taxpayer, how I can be assured that in this current time when the publics are demanding everywhere, most of the part of the world, to defunding the police and use or decrease their budgets and use that money for the betterment of the community. How the police chief will assure me as a citizen that this increase is reasonable and it will be using to make sure the public are feeling good about this increase, especially when the city and the country is going through a financial hardship due to the COVID-19. The second part of the question is our increase for our police force, the budget increase, how you compare with the other cities with the same size and the same number of the police to make sure that this increase is reasonable compared to many others, and we will have the services we need it.
Okay, so do you have that? Yeah, I have a comparator there from what has been put out by other, that have been adopted by other police services boards in terms of budget increases. And I'm just going to try and find that because I think I put that into the
It was in the presentation.
into the presentation that I gave you. Just going to have to quickly find it. Okay. Okay, so when we're looking at some budget increases that other municipalities got, we're looking at in and around the 3%. We're looking at Timmins at 3.16, Peterborough 3.49, Kingston 3.64, York 4.5, Sarnia 4.7, Sudbury 4.7, Peel 4.8, Niagara 4.9. So those are some of the increases that we've been seeing that have been made public. As again, ours is again at the mid to lower end, knowing that, you know, some of those were out of our controls, but it is for other police agencies as well. And in terms of, you know, how can we be assured that it's the best value for the money in terms of what we're doing? You know, what we're really doing as an agency is working holistically with our community partners to try and reduce those calls for service so that the right agency is responding to the right calls for service, and the police are actually responding to those priority one calls that we need to be responding to, and working as diligently as that. So I think that a lot of our provincial funds that we're getting doesn't come just directly to the police. It comes directly to our police and our partners. So we have MCERT programs where mental health and police respond to calls for service. So that's money that's going to our community, that's helping our community and not coming just directly to the police. So we're really working hard to be able to develop those partnerships together, because it is I think a holistic approach, a community approach that we're taking, and it doesn't just always squarely rest on the shoulders of the police, and that's why the outreach is so important, and that community engagement and partnering with KCHC and all the other agencies that we're looking to is going to be so important. And then also just once finally to talk about how does the cost of Kingston Police compare. You know, we're looking at the net cost per capita. So Kingston basically it's $355 per capita per person. And when we're looking at places like Sarnia, it comes to at $360. Guelph is $379. Toronto is $391. Greater Sudbury $392. Barrie $435. Belleville $436 net cost per capita. So, you know, I think we're being very reasonable here within the Kingston Police and how we manage our money. And as I say, you know, John Howes, our finance director, I mean, he's very frugal and working monthly to make sure that our budget is being managed as best as can be under the circumstances, so that we're not running at deficits. And again, this year in particular has been an exceptional year for us. But I'm hoping that we'll be able to, again, get the cost recovery and all the other measures that we've done to get us into a good place at the end of the year.
Also, may I ask you to share with us, when we talk about the community partners and all those agencies and organizations who was partnering with the Kingston Police in the term of doing better policing, how we keep the check and balance on that investment we are doing, how they are approaching the public or the Kingstonian to let them know that they are partner, and then these are the changes coming through, and that's how we are going to change our police, the way of policing and spending our money wisely. So we don't have to talk about the defunding or decreasing the police. The other thing is, what is the possibility to put a comparison on our website, on the police website, that how safer we are when we, if I ask you to compare the budget with the other city, I think is it fair to ask or suggest that maybe we should put up on the website the comparison, how safer we are in the term with the money we have compared to the other city. If we have more, then how safer we are. If we have less, then how safer we are.
Yeah. And I guess that's where the crime severity index comes into play. You know, it has a weighted index, you know, in terms of the higher crimes, the higher violent crimes cause the severity index to increase. But, you know, even within our community, you know, our crime severity index is increasing. And that was as a result of some of the violent crimes and some homicides, which have all been solved, but increased the crime severity index because we had an additional homicide last year versus the year before. So we talked a bit about that at our board meetings. I think it's good. I mean, that's the crime severity index is a good way to sort of explain what's happening underneath the data that we're seeing. But, you know, in terms of how our community and how we work together and how can we share that, I think we have a very good communications relationship with the city of Kingston and their staff, as well as public health, as well as us, Addictions Mental Health, to kind of talk about how we're doing business. You know, bylaw is really working closely with us in terms of responding to noise complaints. And we've diverted about 23% of the calls for service to bylaw, who handles a lot of those calls, and remove them from us. And we've talked about that. And we talk about the fact that bylaw and the police and public health and the AGCO work together in terms of, you know, addressing the ROA Act and the different pandemic orders that are happening, and that we're working together on that. So it's not always the Kingston Police that are taking the lead, but it is bylaw and public health, and we're there supporting the public safety end of things when need be. And there are times when we just have to be on the sideline and let our partners take the lead. And we've been talking about that even in the last couple of days, this past weekend, in terms of the gatherings and the demonstrations that have been happening, and the closing of some businesses that have happened over the weekend. And it's allowing, you know, our community to discuss these things too, and allow these demonstrations in a lawful way to occur. And I think we've been very fair in how we've been doing things. And that's been communicated out through the city, through us, and through public health.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thanks to Mr. Chair.
Okay, so just in case anyone was wondering, Jeff had texted and that he had to leave. And maybe not a question, but just to let us know. Christian.
I have two tactical detailed questions, but so I want to make sure that my colleagues have there and yourself, Chair, have the opportunity to get the strategic questions out of the way before I just ask two small tactical questions.
I think you're good to go.
One is, and I don't know how we make this transparent, but I think it would be interesting to know, given the challenges that we've had around Queens, whether there's any way to make transparent whether the fines that have been levied, both by police and by bylaw, to what extent those are actually being recovered, and to what extent, for instance, justices of the peace and so forth are giving people a pass. I think this might be perhaps interesting for the public to know to what extent the instruments, because inherently you as chief are limited by the instruments that the public puts at your disposal to contain and discourage, disincentivize certain behaviors, and fines and summons seem to have been one key sort of stick that you have at your disposal. But it would be interesting to know to what extent these, but it's not at your, it's not the people who decide whether these actually end up getting enforced and levied are a different part of the justice system. So whether there's any way, not perhaps in the coming days or weeks, but perhaps sort of over the course of a year, to be able to make that more transparent to the public, to show that these instruments are actually working, or perhaps that they're not working, and as a way to demonstrate that basically whether the instruments that we have or not are working. So that's my one question. I'll just leave it at that, and then I'll ask my other question.
So it's a very good point, and that's something that we are tracking as a community as well. You know, in terms of the amps are a good way of because of the pandemic, of course, the courts are shut down. It takes longer in the processes to go through, but the amps are something that have been, I think, a very unique opportunity for the system to work. And I'm being told that these amps are working very well, and that they're being paid. And it doesn't go through the provincial offenses courts, it goes right through the city. But we're also monitoring what's happening at our Part 3 summonses, and is it worth the while of all the paperwork that goes into it versus just a ticket being handed out, just to see, because the point of going through a Part 3 summons is for elevated fines based on the circumstances and the situation at hand. The other thing that we've been doing is also, as chiefs of police and deputies, is that we've been lobbying with the Solicitor General to say, you know, you've given us lots of tools to use here, and we're hoping that you really ensure that these tools are being used appropriately and they're not being discounted and just being the fines are being reduced to next to nothing, because a lot of work has been going into this within our communities and within policing and bylaw and so forth. And we need the assistance of the judiciary to assist us in ensuring that the fines remain as fines and not just being watered down. So those things are being looked at and being proactively engaged with the Solicitor General and the higher ends of the government as well, so that we're advocating for that.
Chair, may I ask thank you, Chief, that was very helpful. And I think it would be any opportunity for you to update the board and the public on how this sort of transpires, I think is greatly appreciated over the coming months. Chair, may I ask my other question?
Yeah, please do.
So the annual report and the budget plan only make one mention in passing to the mounted unit. And so I was hoping that in light of previous discussions at 2 previous budget meetings about the mounted unit, you could give us an update on where we are in terms of moving the mounted unit out of subvention from public funds. And that might also be one way to reassure, for instance, City Council that there are also some things that where Kingston has been, where you as a chief in Kingston have been working quite intentionally to see how we might be able to optimize expenses.
So our mounted unit, as you know, is not part of our budget. It is a part of the fundraising. And I know that when Murney was cut out of the budget, there was a community wanting to have keep the mounted unit, and they found value to this. And so as a result, fundraising has occurred. And as the board had already determined in terms of 2021, they've given the year to raise $75,000 for this year and next year to keep the mounted unit. And again, not in the budget of the Kingston Police, but as a fundraising opportunity. And that has been happening. And we're having a meeting this week with the fundraisers to determine where we're at in terms of by the end of the year, will we have reached the $75,000. So my understanding is that we're very much progressing. I think the last time we spoke was with the last board meeting that we had, and I hadn't had an update there. I think the last time we looked was around $35,000. It has gone further than that, but there's a number of persons that are still submitting cash, and it's still coming through and flowing through. So we still have a little bit of time to be able to find out what that final value is. So again, we're strategically working with that partner this week and then moving forward. But as it stands, it's not in the Kingston Police budget, and it hasn't been there.
Thank you, Chief, for your valiant efforts in that regard, and also for your very comprehensive answers to my questions. That's all I have to ask.
Thank you. There's some, Bridget, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The
Bridget, you're breaking up.
very successful campaign because it really forced the best people to respond. I'm getting a message here that my internet is unstable. Is it okay?
It's still breaking up, Bridget.
May I propose you turn off the video? Maybe?
That conversation is really important, and okay, let's try that. The conversation that the police are not always the best people to respond to some emergencies, and that we do need partnerships, was a really important campaign, and it really did, in my opinion, help break down some silos. And you mentioned partnerships, and that we have sometimes our partners take the lead. Now, today's conversation is about the budget, and the defund campaign was centered around the need for partners to respond. So when partners do respond, have we seen a reduction in costs on the police front?
I think, as we build that infrastructure for our partners to be able to respond, we're going to be monitoring that to see where those efficiencies are going to be. I mean, we're in the beginning stages of that with our the last couple of years with NSERT, but just beginning with our priority 3 and 4 calls. 23% of our noise complaint calls are being diverted. But I think, again, that allows us to redirect our resources into other areas of specialties, such as our drugs and street crime, such as our major crimes, such as our alternative response unit and our beat. And that allows us those savings that we're seeing in areas where there might be calls reductions, and allowing our first responders to go to their priority 1s and 2 calls for service, then allows us then to redirect our staffing levels to go into those crimes that are taking long times and dedicated resources to investigate. And as I said, the double homicide that we've just had is a clear example of that. So really redirecting those resources into those areas. So again, I think we're always monitoring, and if there are efficiencies that are gleaned from working with our partners and where we don't have to respond, how can we make sure that we're now using those resources in the utmost, the best fashion that we can do, whether it's traffic, whether it's, again, our criminal investigations and other areas. So it is being monitored and tracked the best that we can. And that's where I think that IT is so important, and that data analysis is going to be so important for us to do those measures.
That's great, thanks. I look forward to learning from that data.
Okay, so if there's, thank you, Chief, for answering all those questions. We're going to move on to vote on what we're going to put forward to the city. Voting on the 2022 budget that's been prepared for us. May I have ayes in favor? Bridget?
Do we need a motion in the seconder first, Chair?
Sure. May I have a motion to be able to vote on the budget? Bridget? Christian? Very good.
I second.
Okay, all in favor? Good. Thank you. And now we can.
Aye.
Thank you. If we could vote on sending this budget to the city for a vote. Bridget, Christian, myself, We don't see it, Jimmy, if you don't, it's okay. Okay, we have the forum, so, that's passed, and, that will be sent to the city, and, thanks for everyone's time. And I'm gonna, ask for adjournment. Bridget,
Second,
thank
I
you,
just,
Jimmy.
no, hold on a second. I just wanted to make sure that we have the right process, because this is going to be part of the minutes, and I'm not sure if Jimmy knows that he didn't vote on the actual budget at the end. Just Jimmy, do you realize?
I did. I say aye.
Oh, yeah, because
Okay.
it needs to have that in the minutes. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
no, because my net is not really good, so it was breaking up when I said probably. So I'm in the favor.
For purpose of clarification, I think there's 2 yeses from Jimmy on the 2 motions that the chair put forward. That's correct, Jimmy? Can you confirm
Yes.
that?
Yep.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Okay, so then, I will ask, for adjournment. Bridget?
I second.
All right, Jimmy, good, very good. Thank you, everyone. And
Thank you.
bye.
Are we having in-camera meeting too or no?
No,
Okay.
see you Thursday.
See you Thursday
Okay,
for sure. In camera.
yes. No, okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.